host, Ryan Miller, and for the past 15 years, I've helped hundreds of people to raise millions of dollars for their funds and for their startups. If you're serious about raising money, launching your business, or taking your life to the next level, this show will give you the answers so that you too can enjoy your pursuit of making billions. Let's get into it. In this week's episode, I bring on my dear friend Nathan Beckord. Nathan is the founder and CEO of a software company, Foundersuite. Join Nathan and I as he describes how he became hell-bent on helping founders raise capital after spending a significant amount of time in JP Morgan's private placement group. You don't want to miss it. Plus, Nathan reveals all the elements required when raising capital for your startup, from how to get organized to post-closing best practices. This piece of wisdom, combined with his world-class Foundersuite software, will give you a masterclass on raising capital and ignite your fundraising efforts in your pursuit of making billions. Here we go. Hey, welcome to another episode of Making Billions. I'm your host, Ryan Miller, and today I have my dear friend Nathan Beckord. Nathan is the founder and CEO of Foundersuite. It's a platform dedicated to entrepreneurs to manage their fundraising efforts to close more financing deals for their startup. So what this means is this guy has a piece of software that will help you raise more capital for your startup. I can't wait till he comes on the show where he's going to tell us everything about that and how fundraising and using his tools and combination of everything. This guy is a fundraising beast. He's going to walk us through everything to help both funders and founders to achieve the next level in their fundraising efforts. So Nathan, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. I appreciate it. Excited to be here. I love your community. So
yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's certainly an honor to have you here as well. I know our community around the world certainly loves to hear about raising capital. That definitely applies to whether you're in private equity, venture capital, starting your own business, season, everything in between. We all need to know how to start capital. So I am honored to have you on the show. Been so impressed with everything you've done. And we're going to get into that. But really quick, how did Nathan kind of become Nathan Beckord today? Walk us through where it started for you, and then we'll get into the all the good stuff that you got going on.
Sure. So my career is pretty linear. Unlike a lot of people, like I've had kind of one job my entire life. I studied finance in German, then went and did a little time in investment banking and was helping companies raise capital. And this was a million years ago during the dot-com boom, but it was pretty exciting days to be working with companies raising capital. And I did that for a while. And then I worked at JP Morgan's private placement group, helping companies raise capital. And then I went off on my own and hung out a shingle in Silicon Valley called Venture Archetypes and did that and worked under that brand for almost a decade, helping companies raise capital. And now my latest iteration is software for raising capital. So my corny joke is that if this doesn't work out, I really don't know how to do anything else. So this has to work out. I have no other skills other than raising capital. So that's my journey.
Awesome. And so when you worked at JP Morgan, my understanding is you went back to grad school and then you worked at JP Morgan, and like day one, you're like, it's not for me. JP Morgan's a great company, but it's not for everybody, just like any business. What was your first clue that kind of big corporate cubicle career path wasn't for you?
Even when I was a kid, I had an entrepreneurial bent. I was always doing side hustles before the term side hustle had been coined. Always, had some money making scheme that I was doing. I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. But then when you're in college and facing the prospect of graduating, you're like, shit, I'm not ready to start a company yet. And the allure of investment banking is pretty powerful, right? I mean, you can make a lot of money pretty quickly. You've got to work like crazy, but it's a great job, right? It's very prestigious. There's great perks. There's, a lot of exciting work to do when you're doing, taking companies public or helping them, merge or do acquisitions. It's exciting work, but it's a grind. Like you get in there, I got this gig at JP Morgan in their private placement group, and it's a job that people would sell their firstborn child to get, right? It's really hard. They take like 2% of people who apply. I mean, it's just hard to break into. Mm-hmm. I got this, and I just remember walking in and like, there's a lot of politicking and schmoozing you've got to do to kind of get hired. And it's just really brutal work. Like you could be on a Sunday morning having your coffee and get a call. You've got to come into the office to work on some deal that just landed. Like you're never free. So that was part of it. But also it didn't really scratch the entrepreneurial itch. It's fun working with companies that are growth companies and helping them get financed, but it's not that entrepreneurial. And so it didn't scratch that. So even like, day one on the job, I started making notes of startup ideas I wanted to come out with, and did that for like a whole summer. None of them were any good, but it was still a fun exercise.
I love it. And then after you did your thing at JP Morgan, you're like, yeah, it's okay, but maybe not the best fit for what I'm looking for. So you still went hunting. And I remember you told me offline how you started, like on your first day, you're writing out startup ideas on your desk. So that, to me, that's definitely a good indicator that you're just wired different, man. Like a lot of the people that follow the show around the world, they're looking for that startup life, and that's certainly you. So where did it go from here?
And I'll add on to that. I think there's some joke I heard somewhere where the definition of an entrepreneur is someone who is unemployable elsewhere. Basically who kind of can't deal with a regular job. I think there's something to that. I mean, it's a joke, but I think there's some truth in that, like, think of entrepreneurs, they're misfits. They're people who like have a hard time working for other people, right?
Yep.
So after that, I tried to start a clinical trial software company while in grad school. So I went back to finish my MBA in Texas and tried to start a clinical trial software company. There's a program there where you can like license technology coming out of the university, and MD Anderson Cancer Center is this big cancer hospital network, and they had built this software for managing clinical trials. I'm like, okay, this sounds pretty lucrative. And so I got a license for it, spent months negotiating a license to get the software, and then went out and started pitching investors for this business. It was called Trial Logic. And when we got into it, like when we got into due diligence, they're like, this code is like 15 years old. It's spaghetti code. Like, sure, you've got the branding of MD Anderson Cancer Center as an endorsement, but you can't commercialize this, So long story short, spent months trying to start a software business that failed basically right around the time I was graduating. So, I'd missed all the recruiting, on-campus recruiting, didn't have a job offer, and my startup had failed. So I'm like, well, what do I do now? And it's kind of freeing to have no options. That means everything is an option, right? Like I'm not deciding between two Bain Consulting and BCG and JP Morgan or whatever. I'm like, I can do anything I want. So I moved back out to San Francisco, and I'm like, what do I know how to do? I know how to raise capital, right? I've been doing that for a few years. So I just started helping startups in Silicon Valley raise capital, and did that for several years, all the while trying to think of a new startup idea. Nothing was really great. And then after several years, the light bulb finally went off. I'm like, why don't I build software for raising capital?
Awesome.
And start a startup around that. It was like kind of obvious, right? Like in hindsight, in retrospect, but it took a while to think about it. Yep.
That's really cool. And a special call out to our listeners around the world who are listening to this and starting a business. What Nathan did is he just kept going, right? He stuck with it. He always knew he wanted to be an entrepreneur, but he kept being employed as much as your temperament would allow as an entrepreneur. But literally you started learning skills. It's like when people start universities, man, you take a broad spectrum of courses, and then you kind of figure out what you gravitate towards the most. And that's a lot of founders as well. They start things, some work out, some don't, but they keep going and they learn, right? So your background in software and tech and capital raising, and then boom, all of a sudden it all came together, the dots connected, the stars aligned, and you're like, I got it. I got my thing. And so you then launched your idea into Foundersuite. So maybe let's transition into Foundersuite, and how did that start? I know you kind of had the idea of saying, screw spreadsheets. You didn't say that, I did, but you wanted to get rid of that constant spreadsheet thing that's involved in capital raising and really kick the capital raising game up a notch. Maybe you can walk us through a little bit of how it started and some of the benefits that founders receive.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was doing the consulting, let's say you've got a startup, you would come to me, you would hire me because you're wanting to go fundraise. First, I would help you typically hone your pitch, help you create a nice pitch deck, help you build a nice financial model. And then I would spend 50 hours researching investors, and I would load all those investors into a spreadsheet. I would make this fancy spreadsheet for you that would have, kind of a way to track all your discussions you're about to have, give you the spreadsheet and kind of coach you as you're out there, pitching. The problem with that, right? Spreadsheets are inherently free and flexible, easy, but they get messy really quick, right? When you're talking to a couple hundred investors and everything has a follow-up or to-do afterwards, right? Every investor meeting is going to lead to like 2 or 3 follow-up action items, and you've got to be running a really efficient process. Like one of my things I strongly believe in is like your job as the CEO is to get momentum going for your deal. We can talk about that later.
Yep.
And that's hard to do if you're hindered by the tools you're using to manage all this, right? So spreadsheets just kind of fall apart after about 2 weeks of fundraising, from my experience. The first week, they're fine. By week number 2, they're already falling apart. And around this time, I should go back and find the exact date, but Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz, founder of Netscape and a bunch of other stuff, came out with his "software is eating the world" quote, right? Basically, like every industry is going to get software, built around software. And I'm like, that makes sense, right? That was kind of the final light bulb. Why don't we build software to do this? We could do this better in software. So that was what we started with. And that was our first product, is this investor CRM to replace the spreadsheet and manage a pipeline of investors.
Wow, and that's incredible. So Foundersuite is dedicated to entrepreneurs. But one of the things you mentioned to me offline, Nathan, is you're also building, you're extending that product to have a separate product. It's still in development. I don't know if you're ready to reveal a little bit of information, but something for funders or investors who, let's be honest, they also need to fundraise. So you're coming out with a solution for both funders, which is coming soon, and Founders, which is your kind of your flagship product. Can you just a little couple sentences on your future product and when we can expect all that good stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Foundersuite's been around for a few years, and we've since expanded the product line quite a bit to include investor database, pitch deck hosting, email tools, investor updates, a virtual data room. So we've really gone beyond. Did I say investor database? We've built a really huge investor database. And so great. So a lot of startups are using it. A couple thousand per month are using it. We started to see some, I call them intermediaries and deal guys and gals using this. And this is not a startup. This is like a little small investment bank or something using this. And now it's like 10% of our business. So we actually kind of built a version for investment bankers, venture funds, anyone who's helping other companies raise capital. We call it agent model, right? They're acting as agents working with multiple companies. That's the real distinction of that product. And now we're spinning that out, the agent model, into its own platform called Funding Stack. I don't know when this is going to air exactly, but as of September 15th, it's probably 2 to 3 months away from seeing the light of day. We're grinding hard on it, but yeah, it's going to be a completely new platform for investment bankers and venture funds and other deal people, because really they're different than startups. There's a lot of similarities. You're researching investors, you're building a pipeline, you're managing deals, all the activities that have to go onto it. But there are some differences, namely that maybe you, if you're an investment banker, you're working with 6 companies at once. You're helping multiple companies raise capital, and we want to build some synergies around that, so it actually makes you more efficient. So that's the plug for Funding Stack coming soon.
Awesome. I love it. And thank you for that plug. It's a really cool tool. Everything that you've told me about, that's certainly something. Just helping to facilitate in that fundraising. I get it. Probably the most common theme that I get hit up with off the show is, how'd you raise all that money? Teach me, teach me, brother. So
Yeah.
fundraising is something that pretty much, if you're starting a fund, if you're starting a company, and all the ancillary services that are attached to it, a lot of this orbit is driven by fundraising, and that's exactly where you like to play. So what are some of the, going back to Foundersuite, your flagship product for entrepreneurs, what are some of the benefits that a lot of entrepreneurs can expect if they decide to even use your product?
Yeah. So we, kind of our philosophy, we've built this software around a philosophy of how to raise capital. There's kind of a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. So we're really trying to build tools that help founders do it the right way, to do it, best practices. Typically, when you start a fundraise, you've got to identify investors to go after, right? To build a prospect list of investors. That's step number one. And so we've got an investor database for that, where you go in and you search by your industry, your location, your type of investor. If you're raising, going after angel investors or venture firms, family offices, that's our investor database. And we have 212,000 investors covering pretty broad array. And we've got contact information, previous deals, Twitter feeds, social links, like a lot of good data to help you identify, who are the right investors in any given category. I was just doing a demo right before this with a firm that's doing cancer drug development, right? Okay. And so we went in and looked at the biotech category, and there's like 1,500 or so investors. And typical process is you go in, search by biotech, whatever, and then you identify ones that look interesting, and then kind of click through to their website, make sure they're still in business, make sure they're still actively investing, make sure they don't have any competitors. So that's step number one, using the investor database. Step number two is really, like we talked about already, staying organized. Every time you're talking to an investor, it leads to more things that you have to do. And, even if you're the most organized person in the world, you need some system to keep track of everything. Otherwise, things are going to slip through the cracks, and you don't want things to slip through the cracks when you're raising capital, right? That's right. That's how deals fall apart or get stale, because you're not keeping the speed up and the momentum up. So that's what the CRM is really useful for. And then the other tools, like our pitch deck hosting tool, that's when you're actually in the middle, when you're engaged in fundraising, you upload your PowerPoint, your pitch deck, send it out through the system to investors, track and see who opens your email, track and see who opens the pitch deck, how much time they spent looking at your deck. Corollary to that is our email tool. So let's say you sent a pitch deck to 50 investors last week, 20 of them opened it, and looked at it, 30 of them didn't. Maybe you want to send a follow-up email to those 30 investors who didn't look at your deck, and you can do that in one nice UI, and each one's going to get an individual email. So it's going to look like you wrote 30 individual emails, even if you're doing it in one shot, right? So it's kind of like personalized email at scale. We have an investor update tool. One of the best, and we'll talk about this, I think, fundraising strategy later, but one of the best things you can do is send a regular company update to prospective investors. Both prospective investors and ones who eventually write you a check should be getting an update on your business. And so we've got a tool for that. And then last but not least, we have a data room. So once you start to make progress with your fundraise and you're getting into term sheet discussions, you're getting to due diligence, which is a really deep dive into your business that investors are going to want to do. A data room is really good because it's where you can put all your confidential, your intellectual property, your financial forecasts, your historical financials, all that stuff in a data room. You can share it with investors. You can designate what they can do, whether they can view it, whether they can print it, whether they can download it. You can watermark stuff so investors are less likely to share the documents with anyone, right? There's a lot of good security stuff. And then one final thing is, we have a downloadable collection of documents like pitch decks, term sheets, cap tables. So when you're ready to close the deal, we've got a term sheet you can use and explanation of terms to help. So really, again, big picture view is if you think about every step in a fundraise, we're kind of building tools to help do each step a little bit better, a little more efficiently.
Wow, I love that. That is really cool. So all of the tools, you really thought this through, from data room to templates to customer contact and everything in between. So that is certainly quite the advantage to anybody raising capital, whether you're a funder or a founder. So I love that. And I don't know if you're set up, but if you're able to do a demo or anything like that, that'd be awesome.
I'll do I've given it kind of a little explanation already. Why don't I just do a quick and dirty walkthrough of what I just described there?
All right. And we'll walk through, for those people that are just listening to audio, we'll walk it through some of the explanation, or you just go straight to YouTube and kind of see the demo.
Are you able to see my screen?
I am.
Yeah, so I'll do the very, very, very high level walkthrough. But this is the CRM. This is the investor CRM that you would use to manage a pipeline. And each of these little cards represents an investor prospect. And you can see the column titles. Like I have a column title called Research, Sent Intro Email, Sent Deck, Viewed Deck, Responded, Pitched, Diligence, Committed, Said No. And you can create your own columns. A lot of people come in here and have a very specific workflow they're kind of working through, so they'll create columns around that. And then you're just moving these investor cards around your pipeline as you're making progress. As Western Digital Capital goes from responded into a pitch, you're moving that card over there. One of the cool things is if we open up a card, here's where you can add like notes about that investor, add activities which push out to a calendar of choice. So if you want to, add a task like sending customer references and then push that out to your Google Calendar or Outlook, you can do that. You can attach files. You can connect your email. This is actually one of my favorites. So you can integrate your email. So all the email conversations back and forth with investors get pulled in to the CRM. And my favorite thing, if you're working on your fundraise, maybe with a co-founder, or maybe you have some previous investors that are helping you on your fundraise, or maybe you have an advisor, you can each connect your email and see each other's conversations back and forth. So if you have an advisor making intros, you'd actually be able to see those email conversations between your advisor and the investor all in one place. It's a little, I don't want to call it creepy. It's high visibility fundraising is what we call it. But,
yeah,
it's pretty powerful to be able to see like that type of granularity. So yeah, that's the CRM. Under this is the database. And you can search this by keyword. I was just doing a demo with this cancer drug, so that's why I have cancer open, but you can search for investors that do cancer research, stuff like that. You can search by type of investor, angels, accelerators, angel groups, family offices. We're really building out some of these more alternative investors like family offices, fund of funds, limited partners. So if you're a venture fund raising your fund, we have 7,000 or so limited partners in here to do that, all the way up through like private equity and RIAs and stuff like that, venture firms, industry and location. So basically you search this, find investors that look good, kind of click through to see what types of deals they've done in the past, and then you simply add them to your CRM. So it's a really quick way to populate and build a target list of investors. And I'm just going real fast, but the other tools, like I mentioned, maybe you want to send out your pitch deck to a bunch of investors. Very easy to do that. You simply upload a PowerPoint, upload a PDF that's going to turn it into an online version. And then you can send it out, turn on the track views, and see who opened it and how much time they spent. Emails, I mentioned that. One of my favorite things about the email, personalized email in bulk, is that I can actually personalize the emails quite a bit. We're adding more personalization tags very, very soon. So you can, really make it look like you wrote 50 individual emails, even if you're doing it in one shot. And then we have email templates. So things like follow-up email after pitch deck or intro email. And you can create your own templates. When you're fundraising, you're going to be sending a lot of the same emails to different investors. It's just the way it is. So you can create email templates and send it through here. So that's nice. And then let me exit out of this. And then we have an investor update tool. So I mentioned this already, but one of the best things you can do is create a nice, simple email, a company update template that you use every month. Maybe it's every month, maybe it's every other month. That's just a simple kind of summary about your business. A little bit of overview about your business, key wins, what good stuff happened last week, last month, last quarter. Put in images of your product, put in images of your team, talk about what you're going to be doing next. And that's it. And then you can send this out to investors and, again, track and see who opened and read your investor update. And, won't go into everything, but then we also have this data room that I mentioned where you create folders and files, upload documents to those folders and files, and then you can invite investors. This is when you're getting into due diligence. You can invite investors to access the entire data room or just specific folders or just specific files. And you can designate, what they can do, whether they can view the documents, print them, download them, you can watermark it, all that good stuff. There's some other stuff too, which I won't go into. Like we have a great collection of startup docs, downloadable. We have a founders market, which is some deals on other products. So some other good stuff, content and whatnot. But there's the short, high level demo.
Yep. Yeah. Wow. That is incredible. So we've got basically, just looking at this, for those of you who are listening, please head over to YouTube. You got to see this. This is phenomenal. So from just me looking at pure opinion, you may agree or disagree, but to me, it looks like HubSpot meets PitchBook meets MailChimp meets like Google Docs or some data room hosting. And I mean, my goodness, literally, you've covered every single angle, all brought it in under one umbrella. So there's CRM tools, and then you gotta kind of retrofit it into what you need, and you just kind of make it work. And I've been there, man. I've been a funder and a founder, and I guess technically I'm both, but trying to find a solution and under one roof, you would know, being a software guy, managing your tech stack in any organization is an important thing to do. And having these different apps and stuff, trying to make them talk to each other and play together and work together, or you just buy one, bring it all in the house. And you've certainly done that. So you've created the CRM, the process management, the data room, the sending the investor updates. I mean, my goodness, you've literally covered all the bases. So I can tell you're a very experienced guy in fundraising. You know this process better than anybody. And that being said, Nathan, I'm just curious, for some of our investors that are just starting out and they're not even there, they're not even ready to have a piece of software, but they will soon. But for those who are just starting out, what advice, maybe some takeaways or some fundraising tactics would you recommend for people who are some of our entrepreneurs who are trying to raise capital? What are some of those pointers you could share?
Yeah, I love this question. I love this topic. I have a lot of opinions and tactics. I'll start with something maybe obvious, maybe not, but start early. If you're starting a startup and you plan to raise capital at some point in the future, even if it's 2 years from now, you actually want to start identifying investor prospects and building a target list early, like way, way earlier than you probably think you do. Too many people who are founders, start something and then decide, okay, I'm almost out of money. I've got to go raise money. And there's too late. I mean, you have
Yeah.
to start the process like months in advance, ideally 6 months to a year. You start to identify investors, build that list, whether it's in Foundersuite or a spreadsheet or whatever, and then ideally you start to form relationships with them. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But you know, we have this podcast called How I Raised It, and I've interviewed 250 founders. And like, if someone asked me what is like the one commonality of all these 250 people who have successfully raised capital,
Yeah.
is that they built and nurtured relationships with investors well in advance of asking them for a check.
100%.
Right.
Yep.
So
I couldn't agree more.
So anyway, start building that list. And also the other thing I'll mention is I used to do that, purely as a consultant. And I think I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I would put in 50 to 100 hours researching investors and building a list. It takes a lot of time.
Yep.
And so you really should start that early. And then, start to connect with investors. One of my favorite, we have an email template in our send email tool. So a bit of a product plug here, but we have an email template that I call the permission email. And it goes something like this. And you would send it. Let's say you build a list of 200 investors that invest in your sector, your stage, your geography. We have a permission email that says, "Hey Ryan, I've been following you on Twitter for a while. Really impressed by your portfolio. My name is Nathan. I run this startup called Foundersuite. I'm not raising money right now, but I plan to be raising money, in Q2 of 2023. I think we'll start raising money. You're right in our sweet spot based on what you've done in the past. Big fan of you, right? Flatter him a little bit. We're not raising money right now, but we will be. Can I have your permission to send you our company update so you get to know my company a little bit and see our progress? And I'd love to give you a sneak peek of what we're building here, right? You're kind of giving that early access, that sneak peek to investors. And a lot of them will say, sure, no problem. Because you're not asking them, this is a cold email, keep in mind. I'm not asking you, Ryan, to write me a check. I'm not even asking for a pitch deck. I'm not asking for any of your time or Zoom. I'm simply asking for permission to send you our monthly one-page company update, right? And so I start to send this, and I can track and see if you're actually reading or not. But over a period of a few months, hopefully like 6 months, maybe even 8 months, I've been sending you a monthly update every month. You're seeing our progress. I'm reinforcing also in this update who we are, what we do. You're seeing the company kind of develop and take shape, and our metrics hopefully are getting better every month. Our growth rate, our customer adoption, all that stuff. You're seeing this over time. And then let's say I'm planning to raise money in May of 2023. In April, in that update that's going out to 200 people, now it's 300 because I'm still adding people to my distribution list. Now it's 300 investors. In April, I send a little thing at the top of the thing like, hey, we're going to kick off our seed round next month. Let me know if you want early access to our pitch deck, or if you want, sneak peek at this. And I've seen deals get swooped up by those investors that are on the recipient list before the founder even goes out raising capital, right? Because they've nurtured these relationships over a period of time. So that's one of my favorite tactics and hacks for fundraise. It's like how to fundraise without actually going out fundraising. It's a real gradual, nurturing campaign.
Yeah. Incredible. And so those cold emails, I love that template. That's a challenging one. I get asked that a lot as well. So that I hope a lot of our listeners do exactly what you just said. So there's massive amount of wisdom in what Nathan just mentioned, which is how do I I don't have the reputation or the relationships to really launch a startup or an investment fund or firm. How do I prime that pump? How do I find people that I don't know and get them on my side and investing in me and showing confidence? And what you're saying is like, ask their permission. First of all, just like, can I reach out to you? Can I do that? And a lot of people are like, yeah, that's fine. Thank you for doing that. Nothing's more annoying than being subscribed to newsletters or something that you didn't subscribe to. And people are like, what the heck, man? And so doing that, it actually shows class, and it creates that initial conversation that you get to have. So starting out that way, sending some of those cold emails. I know fundraising is more to it than that. What else? What other advice could you have for people trying to raise capital?
So let's carry that kind of chronology or timeline forward a little bit more. So you've primed the pump for 6 months. In April, you teased your fundraise. Hopefully, some of the folks on your distribution list, responded positively to that, but a bunch of them aren't. You're going to be, right? So let's say you kick off your fundraising in May. Now we shift into like full on hustle mode, right? For the first 6 months, it's nurture mode. Now it's hustle mode. And, a couple ways to get in front of investors. Yes, you can still barrage them with cold email, but that's not going to be as effective. Working your network on LinkedIn, right? Really finding any first degree, second degree connection paths to every target investor so you can get an intro. Very good thing to do. Another favorite hack of mine, let's say you have, a list of 300 total, but 100 of those investors you just have no connections to, and they're also maybe not responding to your emails. Whatever, that's fine. Those 100, go into each one and look at the portfolio company founders that investor has invested in. Look at the deals they've done over the past year or so, and then cold email to those founders, really like soft, informal, like, hey, Ryan, I see that Benchmark invested in you. I've been following those guys for a long time. I'm Nathan. I run this cool startup doing XYZ. Could I pick your brain for 10 minutes on Zoom, just what it's like working with Benchmark? And, as a fellow founder, you're probably willing to give me a few minutes of time, kind of present my case. If you like me and like what I do, you're probably going to be willing to make an intro, right? It's very common for founders to help other founders and for founders to ask for those intros from fellow founders. And the reason that works so well is, Benchmark spent 6 months to a year getting to know you and doing due diligence on you and learning to trust you. And I'm a fellow founder, and, founders are good about helping other founders. So it's a really good way to get that warm intro, even if you don't have a good network. I would say so those are a couple of tactics, but surround that with every other angle you can think of. Follow investors on Twitter, engage with them on Twitter, go to networking events, go to TechCrunch Disrupt, go to CES, whatever your industry is, go and actually attend the cocktail party and meet some investors and, what kind of work the 6 degrees of separation to get intros to folks. You got to kind of come at it a few different angles. I'll pause there in case you have any questions, but yeah.
No,
okay.
yeah. So I love what you're saying is, it's more of a joke, but it's serious. It's like, so what you're saying is you got to party with these people. Doesn't mean you're like hanging from the rafters and, nothing crazy like that. But what it is, and this is something that I firmly believe in, you just got to have a remarkable experience with someone. So I always tell people who ask my advice, I was like, you will get further by taking an investor hella skiing than you ever will for a year handing out your business cards and buying them a coffee and blah, blah, blah. You can still do it. It's not that doesn't work, but I was like, why take a year? Do that in a weekend. Just be like, hey, let's go to, hey, you're in Miami. I'm going to be in Miami. I'd love to take you to a boat show. Let's go check out some yachts or whatever. Right. And so, I'm not saying do that. I'm not saying don't do that. What I am saying is I agree with Nathan where he says, do your homework, figure out what they're all about, and then see if you can do that. So have a remarkable experience with them. Now, maybe they like wine. You take them to a winery. Maybe they're an outdoorsy. Whatever that is, try to create remarkable experiences. That's a very good way. And so, yeah, I wholeheartedly endorse what you're saying, man. My experience absolutely agrees with what you're saying.
I like that. I might borrow that. Create a remarkable experience. And you hear stories like this all the time. You hear of like groups out here in Silicon Valley. There's like a cycling group of investors and founders, like a Peloton, I guess that's what it's called, right? Where they go ride bicycles together.
Yep.
And, if you are a bicycle rider, you're going to work your way in there and meet a bunch of investors, a whole bunch of investors that also windsurf, and what's the one with the foil surfing, like get into that. I mean, these are not easy things to learn, but if you can like mix in, right. Also just look for opportunities, right? Like when we were raising, I went down to South by Southwest in Austin, which happens in March. And it's such a magical experience because you have investors and founders coming from all over the country, even all over the world. So you have New York investors in Austin, you have LA investors, you have Silicon Valley investors, all in this place together. And just being out there, you're going to meet people, right? Kind of find where investors congregate and be in that place. Kind of let the serendipity happen. Fortunately, we're, knock on wood, kind of out of COVID, so things are back to real life again, right? As we speak, SaaStr, if you're in software as a service, SaaStr's happening like today. If you're looking for SaaS investors, great place to meet people. But I like the idea of creating a remarkable experience. One other little hack that's kind of a little bit like that. When we were raising money, I was putting on events. Like we were putting on events called Startup Funding 2.0, and we would host them at WeWork and Automatic and other cool locations. Oftentimes Automatic, which makes WordPress, let us use their space. They have this huge office space that no one goes to, can hold like 300 people. They let us use it for free. And so we, pay $500 for some caterers. And I invited like 6 or 7 really important VIP investors to come speak on a panel. And then I sold tickets to founders to come hear them speak about, the future of fundraising. But that's a great way to meet like 6 or 7 investors because I'm moderating the panel and I'm also, hosting them and everything else, right? Like, so put it on an event for investors.
That's right.
Another remarkable experience that's a good way to get to know people without directly hitting them for money.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love that. And so when someone closes out the round, you've got pretty interesting insight on that. So congratulations, you just closed your round. Now what? So how does, from your experience on fundraising for startups, what, right? What's kind of the, how do you wrap it up? Great. You close it, you raise your money. Now what?
Step one is get in the habit of sending investor updates. Now you have investors. Previously, we were sending investor updates to prospective investors. Now we have investors. Put them to work. They own a big chunk of your company. Put them to work. Don't think of them as passive investors. Think of them as like extended team. So start sending an investor update. I do mine quarterly. I mean, people have different cadences. It kind of depends on what your news cycle is, right? But I do mine quarterly, and I talk about our progress we're making, our metrics, our financials, stuff like that. But then we talk about like challenges I'm facing, strategic decisions I'm facing, things I need help with, right? I want my investors, I've got like 11 investors, 1 venture fund and 10 angels or 11 angels. I want them to be helping me out. I want them to be thinking about Foundersuite constantly, making intros. So furthering on to that, a great hack to make sure you actually do that is actually schedule it on your calendar 3rd Friday of every month from 2 to 4 p.m. Block it off so you just sit there and crank on your investor update, right? Make it a habit so it gets done religiously. Investors will really appreciate that. There's a great quote from Jason Calacanis who says, if you're not getting updates from your startup you've invested in, they're probably going out of business, right? Like not hearing from you is a really bad thing. Yep. And when you're going to be raising the next round, you're going to lean on these folks to be making intros, right? So you really want to keep the wheels greased with investors. Other things, what happens after closing a round? I mean, you're on track for probably raising more money pretty quickly. So you raised $1 million, $2 million. That's super exciting. Take your team out for a nice dinner. And then, realize that 12, 18 months from now, you're going to have another chunk of money in the bank 12, 18 months from now, which means you need to start fundraising again 6 to 8 months from now, probably sooner than that. So really the whole cycle kind of repeats itself. Start building that list of Series A investors. then that list of Series B investors, start nurturing those relationships, and know that each time is like a higher threshold of what you've got to prove with your business. It gets harder and harder. I mean, in some ways it gets easier because you now have investors like willing to make intros and stuff, but the bar is higher, obviously, for each round. So that's challenging. Yeah, I mean, those are probably some things like there's no rest for the wicked, basically.
Yes, I always joke. So you know the dark arts of capital raising as I have, and a few of our other guests on this show as well. So it's ironically it's actually quite consistent. The people that know how to do fundraising and fill around, yeah, we all follow pretty much the same methodology, which is you got to love your investors. You got to just build the relationship. So be relational, not transactional. That's how I like to do business. And that's how a lot of investors like to do business, is to say, yeah, sure, you got a cool product, but do we like each other? Because if we don't, it's going to be a long decade or 5 years or whatever it is that we're connected. So a big part of the investor decision, they'll never tell you this, but a big part of the investor decision is likability of the founder. So they're saying, do I even want to work with this guy? And same thing with the founder to the investors, saying, do I like these people? Sure, they got money, but do I want to work with them? So that being said, as we round third base, is there anything else you'd like our fans to know? I would say the first one is how to reach out to you, but anything at all you'd like to share?
I think we've covered most of it. I mean, start early. I will touch on what you just said, and we kind of didn't mention it before. You are in bed with these investors for 5, probably more like 8, probably more like 10 years of your life. So it's really important to choose carefully. And founders, I think, get caught up in, you're almost out of money. You're broke. You're already a startup. You're a starving startup. You're already broke. You're almost out of money anyway. Sometimes I've seen this story play out tragically too many times where, there's some investor interested. Okay, they have sort of a negative, vibe about them, or maybe there's some negative chatter on online about them, right? But I need their money. Okay, you're gonna make your life living hell. You have to choose really carefully, and I'd almost say better to, go bootstrap or even go out of business in some scenarios than to take money from an investor who's going to make your life hell. Like, I don't think that gets enough attention in the startup community of how important it is to choose really good investors that you would be willing to go hella skiing with, that you would be willing to spend a week whitewater rafting down the Colorado River with, that have your back. So don't skip that step, right? Spend the time due diligencing and referencing those investors. I think we've covered pretty much everything on this talk. Treat fundraising like a game. It's going to be really stressful. It's going to be harder than you think it's going to be unless your metrics are just so off the charts that, you can kind of write your own script here. And just know it's going to be hard. So that's why you should start with a startup that you love, that you can really be passionate about, right? Kind of going back to first principles. You should be pitching with passion because you love what you're doing and you need to see this startup in the world. And investors are going to gravitate or be kind of magnetically attracted to that passion. So that'll help. So anyway.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you. So, as we wrap things up, I hope you enjoyed our time with Nathan Beckord and I. So in closing remarks, just remember to follow Nathan's advice, nurture those relationships, put the time in to research your context. Nathan mentioned 100 hours a week, I believe, but a lot, right? So put that in. Do not underestimate the amount of time. You will get out what you put in. And finally, once you close your round, just stay in close contact, like you're trying to build a relationship, because you should be. Investors are not opposed to it. They're all in. They've got their money on the line too. So they want to get to know you. In fact, they may want to help you. You do these things and you too will be well on your way in your pursuit of making billions.
Wow, what a show. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Now, if you haven't done so already, be sure to leave a comment and review on new ideas and guests you want me to bring on for future episodes. Plus, why don't you head over to YouTube and see extra takes while you get to know our guests even better. And make sure to come back for our next episode where we dive even deeper into the people, the process, and the perspectives of both investors and founders. Until then, my friends, stay hungry, focus on your goals, and keep grinding towards your dream of making billions.